Fogle. She, as I said, flipped her House of Representatives District 135 and is now vying for Senate District 30. And that is pretty much Springfield. So welcome from the Queen City down there, Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that you know it as the Queen City. I'm trying to make that a more popular term amongst my colleagues in Jeff City, so I appreciate the reference. Hi, everybody. I am State Representative Betsy Fogle. A lot of you looking around, I've had the opportunity to meet over the course of the past 6 years. Gosh, it goes by fast. I was first elected to the Missouri State House of Representatives in 2020 after a career working in public health. I worked at a place called Jordan Valley Community Health Center for my entire professional career up until the day before I was sworn into office. And all of us in Jefferson City, or anybody who puts your name on the ballot, you know, you have a why and you have that thing in your life that either excited you or made you mad enough to want to jump in and try to fix things. And my experience working in public health in an environment where we primarily served working families, individuals on Medicaid or underinsured, definitely solidified my desire to get involved in the political realm, working every day with families that did everything quote unquote right, that were, you know, going to work, working hard, raising their families, and then one unexpected thing would just completely derail and change the trajectory of their life. Then I would go to Jefferson City and advocate to my elected officials about things like Medicaid expansion or expanding postpartum care to moms on Medicaid or increasing substance use services for individuals who were struggling. And then we'd go and listen to what was being debated on the House floor. And there was very clearly a disconnect between what my constituents wanted and what I was seeing working in healthcare and the debates that were happening in Jefferson City. So I decided to put my name on a ballot and flipped my House seat in 2020 by a razor thin margin, beating a Republican incumbent and at the time becoming the second elected Democrat to serve in the lower half of Missouri. 2 years later, Representative Stephanie Hine flipped a third House seat, so we now have three Dems that represent the city of Springfield in the Missouri State House. I'm at a coffee shop, so I'm sorry if it's a little loud in the background. I have spent the last 6 years representing about one-fourth of the city of Springfield in the state house. If you watch me or know anything about me, you know I spend my time on the state budget. I am the ranking minority member in the budget process, so I touch everything in our just over $50 billion state budget. I'm a strong proponent of public schools. I am completely against the efforts to privatize education, and that is one of the things that is most concerning to me about the future of our state and wanting to make sure that we have a voice in the state Senate who is committed to making sure our public school classrooms are fully funded and that our public dollars are going to educational systems that serve the needs of all children, not just people who subscribe to a certain religious belief or a certain ideological belief. I have championed access to childcare. That's something really important to me. Got to be the tie-breaking vote on the budget committee last year on fully funding our childcare subsidy program, fully funding our foundation formula, and then just trying to do my part to bring balance to what is very clearly an unbalanced system in Jefferson City. You guys know this. I know I'm talking to people who are very politically involved, but we have super majorities in both the House and the Senate. If every Democrat walked out of the building, Republicans can still do whatever they want. So a great example of this is congressional redistricting. I'm sure you guys saw what Democrats in Texas did. They got on a plane, they left the state, made sure they couldn't give the majority party quorum. Here in Missouri, if we got on a plane and fled the state, Republicans would just do a happy dance because we wouldn't be in the building standing in their way. If we are able to flip two state Senate seats and three seats in the Missouri State House of Representatives, which you guys in Boone County have done your part to flip seats, we will break the supermajority, and I intend to do everything I can in November to make that a reality. Springfield, I'll just talk quickly about the race down here in the Queen City. Springfield, in 2024, Democrats got 48.5% of the vote. What that signals to me is that Springfield is primed and ready to flip. You guys know this as well as I do. If you're looking at national trends in similarly situated down ballot races under the second Trump administration, Republicans have not fared well. I have no reason to think that things are going to get better in this country prior to November. We have seen substantial double-digit shifts where people are shunning, in my opinion, the extreme beliefs of the Trump administration and wanting to self-moderate. In Springfield, I don't need a double-digit shift. I just need 1.5% of people to be fed up with what's happening in Washington, D.C. and to be a good candidate who has the money to flip the district and most importantly knocks the doors to get out and meet voters in Senate District 30. And I intend, of course, to do all of those things prior to November. It is the Senate district here is the entirety of the city of Springfield, and then about 10,000 voters that reside in Greene County, but not in the city, but basically it's the city of Springfield, currently held by Republican Lincoln Huff. If you guys know Lincoln, if you've had the opportunity to meet him, you know that he has very publicly broken from his party on really significant issues. He did not vote for the congressional maps. He did not vote to repeal Proposition A. He was alongside me, the tie-breaking vote on fully funding our foundation formula, very pro-public education. I think having a Republican in office who has demonstrated his ability to break from his party bodes well for what the people in Springfield want. And they want people who uphold those values in Jefferson City, where things like Proposition A or paid sick leave, minimum wage increases, Amendment 3, access to abortion, were passed and held here in Springfield and in Senate District 30 by significant margins. I will be the Democratic nominee. There's no primary. I always like people to know that. There's one Republican in the race, and there's also a Libertarian in the race. So that 1.5% margin actually gets a little bit closer when you know that a Libertarian candidate is going to pull voters that would have likely been a Republican voter, not a Democratic voter. So I think things are primed and ready for me here in Springfield, and for our team, of course, to be successful this November and do our part to bring balance to, again, a very unbalanced system in Jefferson City. So I'll pause there. Would love to take questions. I know I just talked a lot at you. That's a little bit about me, why I got involved in politics, and then, of course, what I've been working on the last 6 years in our state capitol.
Very generous of you to give us so much time for questions.
Oh, of course, of course.
And we usually have a whole lot, but people have a hard time thinking of them right away, except for Herb. Herb. Try you to unmute, Herb. Everyone has
My
to unmute
apologies.
themselves.
I tend to be shy. I would like to have a picture of the electorate in your Senate district in the context of Greene County as a whole and what's beyond and so forth. My picture of Greene County is shaped a lot by the long-lasting Sheriff John Poindexter, who was my colleague on a state commission, and who did not admit to anyone that he was a former high-ranking figure in the FBI and a prestigious law school graduate, and never appeared in public in anything other than a Stetson hat and cowboy boots, including for formal affairs of Greene County.
Yeah.
What can you do for me?
Yes. So the city of Springfield is rapidly growing. Every election cycle, the city trends about 2 percentage points more Democrat leaning. We are home to Missouri State University, of course, the state's second largest public university. We have Ozarks Technical Community College, Drury University, several colleges. We are also home to the largest public school district in the state. When you look at Greene County as a whole, Greene County does trend or tend to be more conservative. But when you look at the city of Springfield, it truly is one of the only Senate seats in the state of Missouri where 50% of the constituency votes for Republicans, 50% of the constituency votes for Democrats. We are still very much, right here in the middle of the Bible Belt and have a lot of conservative leans. But I'm no stranger to that. My family has cattle farmed in Berry County, about an hour away from here, since the mid 1800s. And Southwest Missouri is my home. I've lived here my whole life, and I feel like I'm a good representative of the values of Springfield. I think Springfield probably is a little bit more populist of a Democrat lean than other parts of the state. I think what people want here is a government that functions, strong public schools. We want to make sure that we have affordable health care and that basic vital services are taken care of. And otherwise, I think we want government to leave us alone. And that just happens to be kind of how I view the role of government as well. I want a strong social safety net wrapped around people who need it. I want to make sure we have well-funded public schools that serve the needs of all kids. And otherwise, I don't think it's necessarily government's role to tell me how to believe, who to love, what healthcare decisions to make. And I think that those things are all in line with the city of Springfield. Again, in 2024, Democrats got just under 49% of the vote, up ballot Democrats in that election cycle. And to me, that signals that Springfield is ready for a change. Anytime I put my name on the ballot, I have outperformed other Democrats by a 10% margin. So if you apply that to the state Senate race here in Springfield, I firmly believe that this will be the election cycle that we can elect our first ever Democrat to the Missouri State Senate. I will also say there is a long legacy of Republicans that have reigned and served the city of Springfield, who have built a legacy of doing what they think is right for the city above their own political party. One of my very first campaign contributions came from a woman named Amy Bentley, who was a Republican senator from the city of Springfield, but did a lot for early childhood, did a lot for public schools. And by the end of her life, unfortunately, she passed away recently. She was so fed up with the Republican Party that she wrote me one of my very first campaign contributions as a formerly elected Republican state senator. I think that's what Springfield wants. We want people who are going to put the needs of what's right over any political allegiance. And I think I've demonstrated my ability to do that without ever compromising my ideals and morals about why I sit on my side of the aisle. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You stir my hopes.
of course. Good.
I have an important question for
Yeah.
any state leader at this point from Alice Turner. I'm not quite sure what she's getting about, so I'll read what she says and then maybe say what I think. Impact of the no income tax in Missouri. So she's interested in what this challenge is. And is it realistic to say that it cannot be easily overturned if they do it after devastating our state with that Hancock Amendment back there? In other words, like many of these things, it's so convoluted and complicated that I guess we'd like to hear someone like you give your impression of things at this point.
Absolutely. I am completely and wholeheartedly against the governor's tax proposal. The income tax currently, and you guys might already know this, so sorry if I'm explaining it too in the weeds, but I think it's the most important thing besides passing our state budget that we'll do this year in the General Assembly. If we eliminate the income tax, that generates roughly $9 billion of economic activity through the form of general revenue. We collect $9 billion of revenue through the form of through the income tax. If we eliminate that, one of two things will happen. One, we will have a significant budget deficit, which means I never like to talk about the budget just through the terms of the budget, but I like to talk about it through the lens of what does this do for constituents and what does the budget do for people. Already this year, we have flat funding for public education. We have flat funding for higher education. We are seeing significant cuts to the Department of Mental Health and for individuals with developmental disabilities. We are entering into a very difficult few budget cycles or a few 3 budget years in the state of Missouri, regardless of anything that we do. If we eliminate the income tax, what that will mean is two things. One, in years to come, we are going to have significant budget deficits, which will mean less money going to kids in public schools, which will mean cuts to our Medicaid program, which will mean continued cuts to individuals with disabilities. The second thing that will happen with the triggers built in is those revenue deficits through the form of the income tax won't happen unless we meet certain triggers. Those triggers will only be met if we increase revenue in other ways. So if we decrease and get rid of the income tax, we will, without a doubt, increase revenue through expansion of the tax base, meaning services that currently are prohibited by being taxed from the Missouri Constitution will be allowed to be taxed. That means when you go get your haircut, if you have to get a lawyer, if you have to hire a mechanic, if you have to hire a plumber for your house, all of those things become a taxable service. Second, the sales tax will increase. No one on either side of the aisle has been able to model for me how this will not result in a significant cost of living increase for those in the lower 80% and a tax cut for those in the top 20. If someone could point to me how this would create a more equitable and fair taxation structure, I would be at the table willing to negotiate. But I am not comfortable giving unchecked unchecked power to the General Assembly for the next 3 years to increase sales tax to whatever they see fit. we know that the income tax is a more progressive form of taxation. I got the bill sponsor to say that on the floor. If we move from that to a sales tax model and make up that $9 billion in a sales tax and taxation on services, that will be a significant cost of living to most of my constituents, where the average income of House District 135 is $38,000 per household. I am completely against this. I think the ballot language is a little tricky. The ballot language will read something like, do you want to eliminate the income tax and modernize the sales tax and the tax base? The only way that those two things get modernized is by increasing them. I think the ballot language is very misleading. If we want to eliminate the income tax, we should lay out for voters how much their other cost of living is going to increase. But the bill doesn't talk about that. The bill only gives the right to repeal the income tax and does not lay out specifics about how we're going to increase that revenue. So I have a lot of concerns with the income tax proposal. As it relates to the Hancock Amendment, that's very technical in nature. Here in Missouri, there are concerns about the General Assembly not being able to raise taxes, but that the prohibition on that does kind of change, because we would codify in the state constitution the allowance for the General Assembly to increase sales tax and expand the tax base to whatever they see fit for the next 3 to 5 years. The House version said 3 years. The Senate committee sub says 5 years. So it gives blanket and unchecked power to the General Assembly to increase your taxes to whatever they see fit. Does that, I hope that answers the question.
Well, yeah, you're with people who love to get down in the weeds, and several of us could follow you on some of that and remember Hancock. But better than you do, probably at your age.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
you're exactly right.
the issue of, going from a little bit of progressive tax to totally, non-progressive or terrible taxes is just the major thing to me. And as a historian, I find that as soon as the wealthy make themselves tax-free and put all the burden, they still want to have government, but they want the poor people to pay for it.
You're
That's what
exactly
happened
right.
before the French Revolution, and pretty much all the others too. And it's just not, uh, in my way of thinking, it's just not the way. It's not modern. I'm sorry.
You're exactly right. I think it's very disingenuous. I have seen the governor's talking points on this. They are pitching this as it is going to be an increase on things like a luxury yacht tax. You don't make up $9 billion off of taxing yachts in the state of Missouri. They are being very disingenuous when they say that this isn't going to shift the burden of who's paying taxes on the backs of working families.
Right.
And think about what other groups of people don't pay taxes. People who are retired, people who are living on disability, like they will receive none of the benefit of the tax break and have to pick up all the burden of the increase in taxes.
Right. I mean, Ronald Reagan destroyed the middle class by raising the level of the payroll taxes, which everyone has to pay when they work. And the middle class hasn't moved a smidgen since then. So that was big. People did, they said, oh, they're paying for what needs to be paid for. They're paying for it. Yeah, but the people at the top don't pay proportionate to what they get out of the whole system that the government runs.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to stop here because we have a question from either Mary Jo or Al.
This just made our local paper this week. There's a proposal to decrease funding for publicly funded college programs that don't produce high income. Does
Yeah.
now this seems at best bad, and as worst maybe backwards. Any thoughts on that? Is there any chance of that actually coming to pass?
I actually was really proud of the people on that committee on both sides of the aisle, because they both beat up on that bill pretty bad. When you think about the definition of low income earner or what jobs meet that definition, you're talking about things like all of our workforce that works in the early childhood education space. That's one of the lowest paid sectors in the state. So we're telling people that we're not going to make investments in educational opportunities for people who want to go work in our childcare facilities and our pre-K programs. There are a lot of really important and valuable workforce sectors that wouldn't meet that qualification. And I did appreciate seeing bipartisan pushback of that bill. But that is a narrative that I'm definitely starting to hear in Jefferson City. And I think that it's not going to go away, that we should only be investing in educational opportunities for some programs. And at the heart of it, I really think I think the majority wants to eliminate all funding opportunities for places like Truman State as the, liberal arts public institution in the state of Missouri. I got my degrees in sociology. That's on the list of educational opportunities. I don't think the majority wants to invest in religious studies, philosophy, and I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I don't think that bill will go anywhere. It's late in the session and it received such pushback from everybody, but that mentality of only certain education opportunities should be deemed valuable or we should invest in, I don't think that is going to go away anytime soon.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Anybody in higher education knows that you just can't control things that carefully. It's all changing. It's all, nowadays businessmen want people with a liberal arts background and business, maybe graduate school. And they're just not seeing the big picture about how the future is made. But I will stop. I'll say that I still don't see our second guest. So
I did text her. I think on her schedule, she had it slated for 12:30. So
right.
she should be here in the next 2 minutes.
Oh,
She's
she's running that tight of a schedule. Okay,
yes,
then we'll try to finish
something else. So I think she should be here in the next 2 minutes.
Excellent. Then I think we will try to keep it short with you. I want to ask you kind of a important question, I think. What can we do to help you and Keri and these really inspiring leaders in this next election cycle? Is that a reasonable, broad question for you?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that. So again, if we're able to flip 2 state Senate seats, and I think I saw a question in the chat just to go over those numbers one more time. It's 2 seats in the Senate, 3 seats in the Missouri House. If we're able to flip 2 and 3 this November, we break the supermajority status. Why that's important in the state Senate is things like suspending the filibuster and utilizing the previous question motion, which if you remember last session, Republicans used. Those things become a lot harder if we're able to break the supermajority status. That is why those 2 Senate seats become very important. How you can help me and Keri, who I see on the call now, we need votes and we need money. I have a goal of getting to $1.5 million. I know that no matter how much I raise, Republicans are going to outspend us. I have been outspent in every race I've ever put my name on the ballot for. Republicans in Missouri just happen to have more money. But if we're able to hit our thresholds of what we're trying to raise, we will win our elections. So that means send us money, host events for us in Columbia. We are so thankful that the 4 Democrats elected in Columbia are uncontested. I know they're going to be doing everything they can to help Keri and I get elected and help Senator Weber in the Missouri State Senate. If you know anybody in Springfield, of course, or in Lee Summit in Keri's area, make sure you talk to them about the importance of flipping those 2 seats. And I guarantee no one will work harder than Keri and I to flip our seats. And we look forward to November.
Well, Herb's hand came down, so we will thank you, Betsy.
Yes, of course.
Now,
thank you guys for your time. We're so appreciative.
And get ready to hear Keri. Now, did I hear you both at Gary Oxenhandler's Move the Needle event? That was both of you. I was sure it was Betsy. I wasn't sure it was also Keri. So this is a different level. That was a new idea, Move the Needle. We're a very old organization, nearly 50 years, Muleskinners, maybe more than 50 years now. So, Keri, I did not introduce you because I can't. Your CV is too long. But what I said is that we have 2 flippers today. That Keri Ingle flipped her district House District 35 some years ago and is now a candidate who wants to flip the 8th. So if you can introduce yourself in ways that you want us to know about you and what you're doing and your campaign, and give us maybe half your time or so to ask you questions, I'd be very grateful. Welcome, Keri.
Thank you so much. Good morning and happy Friday to everyone. As David said, my name is Keri Ingle. I'm a state representative from House District 35, which is primarily Western Lee Summit. The House District has a little sliver of Raytown and a little sliver of Kansas City in it as well. He is absolutely right. I flipped my seat back in 2018 during the first Trump midterm election. And prior to that, I had never run for office or been politically active before. My background, I'm a master level clinical social worker and was working as the adoption specialist for the Jackson County Children's Division when Trump was elected in 2016. I was on maternity leave with my daughter and really freaked out. Watching those returns come in, was really, really concerned about the impact on marginalized and vulnerable populations that I work with every single day, and the impact, frankly, on all of us, right? I think a lot of us were called hyperbolic and dramatic, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, and no one is saying that anymore, are they? So we
Keri,
saw
can I interrupt you? I'm having a little trouble with your sound, and we are recording. So if you could be just a little closer to the mic, or
absolutely.
That
Can you
sounds
hear me
much
better?
better. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So, like I was saying, I ran for the first time. I decided to run in 2016, right after the election. My House district at that time was a Republican, and he had run unopposed in 2016, which I thought was absolutely insane. We didn't have any infrastructure in this area. We hadn't had Democrats running out in Eastern Jackson County in a really long time. And so we didn't have any voter data on the area or any infrastructure at all. And myself and a group of grassroots folks just started plugging in. And there was a special election in 2017, if you all remember, when Hillary Shields ran out here. She was one of the only special election candidates at that time. And so it really started laying the groundwork for Eastern Jackson County. And since that time, and back in 2018, I flipped my seat from red to blue against a very, very popular community staple. He had been the director of Parks and Recreation for 38 years and has his names on buildings and parks across the city. And so I was supposed to lose by 5 points. We won by 7. And that was because of the sheer amount of effort and work that my small army put in getting out the message. So we flipped that seat back in 2018 by 7 points, picked up an additional 2 points in 2020, additional 2 points in 2024. It is now in 2024, we held it by 15 points, making it officially a safe blue seat. We expect in this Trump midterm election that my successor will win by somewhere between 17 and 20 points. That's the level of work we've been doing out here. In the seat next to me, because I was the first Democrat elected out here in the Lee Summit, Blue Springs area in 2018, we flipped the seat next to me back in 2022. That's Representative Kemp Strickler. And we are now working on flipping the Speaker of the House, his House seat as well, which is the most likely to flip House seat on this side of the state. And so we've really laid the groundwork. I was really, really excited to see the work done by folks across the board. Here in Lee Summit, we made national news on Tuesday night, absolutely sweeping the slate from the mayoral election, city council election, and school board election. Every single seat is now held by a progressive in Lee Summit. And that is something that would have been unheard of 10 years ago. Just to kind of paint you the picture on how far we've come, back in 2016, Donald Trump won the city of Lee Summit, which is roughly the same size as Columbia. We're a little bit over 100,000. Donald Trump won Lee Summit back in 2016 by 16 points. In 2024, Kamala won by 2. It's an 18-point swing in 8 years. So we are incredibly excited about the opportunities that we have to not only break the supermajority in the House by flipping some really, really contentious House seats out here in Eastern Jackson County, but by also flipping the state Senate seat. And we've seen, I'm sure, Betsy talked about hers a lot as well. Our state Senate seats are almost identical in demographics and the way that they've been shifting over the course of time. We both require three points in order to flip the seat. That is all we require. And the overperformance that we've seen on the national level in every special election since Trump was reelected in 2024, we've seen overperformance. Can you all hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
Does it help
Yes.
when I'm speaking like this? Okay.
Yes, when you get closer, it sounds better. Thanks.
Absolutely. So over the last, since 2024, we've seen every special election that has occurred, the average overperformance over how Kamala did in those districts is 13 points. And so we fully expect that should this momentum continue, that not only will Betsy and I flip our seats, but we might actually pick up House seats that we are not even targeting. And that's due to obviously the cost of living, the economy, lies that were told by every Republican in order to be elected in 2024, where they have continued to do the opposite of what they promised voters. And the message that we are getting out, that we are for the working people of this state and this country. And we will do whatever it takes to not only do what is in the best interest of all Americans, but to secure the promise of our democracy. And so I already have a really extensive ground team. I'm operating with a coordinated campaign with all of the House candidates in my Senate district. And what that means is that when they have volunteers or they go out and knock doors, that they're also talking about me and taking my literature out on doors. And that's every single day. And it's a coordinated message. We just secured our office space here in Eastern Jackson County in a very centralized location for my Senate campaign, and are having regular canvas kickoffs. Our Lee Summit Democrat group met last night. There were over 100 people in attendance. The energy is palpable. People are incredibly excited to invest in this area. If I haven't said it yet, I'll say it now. I have two Republican opponents running against me this cycle. One of them is former Representative Dan Stacy from Blue Springs, and the other is the Speaker of the House, John Patterson. And while people from outside this area view that as a legitimate concern, I view it as an advantage, because we can absolutely tie everything that the Republican Party has done to him. And we will, and we are. And we've had a series of really amazing polls come out just within the last couple of weeks that show us ahead substantially. Our name ID is identical. The only advantage that he has is money in this race, and he has a lot of money, and I'm not going to shy away from talking about that. He is the Speaker of the House. He has $3 million in the bank right now. But I'll tell you that you oversaturate in the Senate race at $1.3 million. And if money won elections, then Kamala Harris would be president. That is not what wins elections after a certain point. It is messaging, it is candidate quality, it is making sure that we have folks getting our message out at the doors. That is the number one thing that flips seats, and we know that. And like Betsy said, I was outspent in my first race as well, and was supposed to lose by 5 points. And so I love that challenge. I accept that challenge. And I know that the people of Kansas City and the state are going to want to hold the man accountable that repealed Proposition A, that sent Amendment 3 back to the ballot, and now is trying to enact the largest tax increase in the history of the state of Missouri on the backs of the working people of the state through swapping out the income tax for sales tax. And so we are really, really excited to talk to as many voters as we can, and to get people fired up about having substantial change and real representation in this area of the state.
Well, that's a wonderful introduction and overview. I see that Betsy has evacuated to her next event. I don't see her on here anymore, so feel free to speak for her too. I know you and many others, as well as Betsy, are working together. Herb, what's your question?
Thank you for being with us. You're instilling hope in my heart, as I had as I had said to others here, that I needed. I wonder if you would like to comment on one of the bills just passed by House and Senate and sent to the governor, the anti-Semitism bill, which got into a bit of controversy, but not on its key point, which is the meaning of anti-Semitism, which will probably be controlling if this goes to litigation. All best dictionaries give its first meaning as its original meaning: hostility or hostile action toward speakers of Semitic languages, one of which is Hebrew, another is Aramaic, the language presumptively of Jesus, and Amharic, which still lives in Ethiopia, and a few others. But the great overwhelming majority of Semitic language speakers speak Arabic. And so this is primarily aimed, as it's written, as an opposition to speaking bad about people who speak Arabic. Would you like to comment on the bill that is before the governor?
I will try to give a brief summation on what the bill sponsor and proponents of the bill have stated, and I'm happy to provide what the opponents have stated as well. The overarching concern, there isn't a large Jewish population in Kansas City, at least on my side of the state line or in my Senate district. So I rely heavily upon what my friends and colleagues in Jewish communities would say in the St. Louis area. I know that there have been attempts at car bombings. There have been, there was a lot of harassment aimed primarily at Jewish people in St. Louis. And I think that was, seeing the attacks on Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro's home from arson. Anti-Semitism is still very real. It is still an active threat. And if you ever doubt that, just get on social media. It pops up, and it primarily pops up on the far right wing. And I think, with the rise of hate groups like the Proud Boys, the KKK is still very active in different parts of this country. There's still rampant anti-Semitism that happens in the United States and in Missouri as well. While it might not be something that affects my life immediately or the lives of most of my constituents, I do tend to listen to the folks that it does impact in those communities, which are in the St. Louis area. There was a lot of concern about it having a chilling effect on speech, particularly on college campuses when it comes to the war in Gaza. And those conversations were had. And I think that there was a lot of legitimate concerns raised by that. I don't believe that it would be an infringement on the First Amendment in the way that it was being described. The First Amendment is obviously sacrosanct, and if there were concerns, those would be challenged in court. This would just provide more teeth to situations where slurs are being used. There was a lot of concern that it would have a chilling effect on talking about being anti-Israel itself as opposed to being anti-Jewish people. And those distinctions were made throughout the debate. Obviously we'll see what courts say. But I hope that answers your question.
Hey, I have a question.
We raised the question, which is important on both notes. Whether the bill got it right is a question, but the issue is a darn important one.
Yeah, it's an essential issue of our time, really. Hey, bombs going down and all that. I have a different kind of question. Again, I'm looking for all this hope and excitement. Maybe your ideas about whether it's a good thing that you didn't have any democratic infrastructure when you started, that you had to make one, that you had to find out what it was. I mean, I see you and our present chair in Boone County, going through similar, not only her, but the people around her, going through similar processes saying, let's do this. Let's make this happen. Let's do this however it needs to be done, and putting up with some of us old folks who try to, say, oh, we can't do it that way. We have to do it the way we always did it. I guess what I'm trying to say is, what do the Democrats need to think about?
I mean, ideally, we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel after every election cycle, right? I think that for a really long time in this state, when we held the majority until the early 2000s. And so a lot of that was taken for granted. I know that there was a shift that happened, and I'll just speak about Missouri when I talk about this, but there was absolutely a shift that happened and that allowed the Republicans to take control. And it wasn't just the Tea Party movement, it happened long before that, where we stopped focusing on local elections as much. And we're only paying attention to, the sexiness of the federal elections, right? What's happening in DC. And when you stop investing and supporting candidates at the local level that reflect your messaging and reflect your values and reflect your principles, then you're no longer building that bench. And I think that we had gotten really comfortable with our majority, and could not even see it slipping away when it did. So I would say, it's not ideal. We've gone through a lot of growing pains in order to get to where we have. I think that having the investment that we have made, and I say we as in, these grassroots organizations like the Lead Summit Democrats and the team that I built back in 2018 that have now facilitated other races, right? Like the same team that got me elected in 2018 and got Representative Kim Strickler elected in 2022 is the same that flipped all of the seats on Tuesday nights. These are the same people that have been involved for that long. And so I think that it all builds on each other. These are building blocks that we've created. We're sharing this voter data and realizing that we're all in this together. I think one of the things that has honestly been really great is that when you don't have a lot of elected Democrats or a lot of people that have been engaged for forever, we're not all fighting for, there's not that, where we've been able to make it a cohesive team, where we're all rowing in the same direction, trying to keep ego out of it, remembering that the only thing that matters at the end of the day is winning. We have to, the only thing that is going to change Jefferson City and the results that we're seeing from Jefferson City is to change the people that are there. And then we have to win in order to do that. And so I think that everyone has had just a really remarkable attitude of just, I don't care who gets credit for things, rolling up your sleeves and getting out there, knocking doors, making phone calls, doing the stuff that's not sexy, right? Writing the postcards, writing the thank you cards, hosting events, and doing it when you're tired, and doing it when it's cold, and doing it when it's hot, and knowing that in order to have the Missouri that we want at the end of the day, there's going to take so much work to get there, but the reward is also so great. I got to see a lot of some of my very volunteers that I have had since my first race back in 2018 last night, and speaking at that event, and realizing how far we've come and how far we have to go, right? But we can see the finish line, and that and trying to invigorate them and invigorate all of you that this is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And they are going to throw so many things at us that are, and the intent is to discourage us, to get us to give up, to get us to stop being hopeful. And that's at both the national level and the state level. And that's why that they're attacking us on so many fronts right now. Everyone is talking about, the gerrymandering and the redistricting that happened during special session last year with Congressional District 5, which is my congressional district. But what hasn't got as much attention is the attempt to completely destroy and destruct our initiative petition process in the state through another vote that will go to the people because it's within the Constitution. So that is going to be on the ballot this year. Another, the repeal of Proposition A happened last year, earned paid sick leave, that passed overwhelmingly. They're sending abortion back to the ballot and trying to enact a ban within the Constitution under the guise of protecting women's health. So all of these things are happening simultaneously, and they're happening on purpose to try to discourage all of us, to try to divide us amongst our ranks. But it's not going to work, and they're doing it because the writing is on the wall. When you look at what they're trying to pass as far as phasing out income taxes and replacing that by raising sales taxes and raising service charges exponentially. They're doing that because the writing is on the wall. They have access to all of the same news that we do, and they know that they are losing on everything that Donald Trump won on in 2024. They are upside down on the economy. They are upside down on immigration. Republicans are upside down on immigration for the first time in decades. So those two key things that they fought for are now issues that we can take hold of as Democrats with a cohesive message that makes sense for Americans. I'm seeing some questions pop up in the chat.
Oh, right. Yes.
So
Go ahead.
the issues here that we're focusing on, the first one and the most important one is the economy. People are struggling to be able to afford to live. The cost of everything is skyrocketing. Inflation's gone up 1 percentage point. The cost of everything has gone up a percentage point over the last month. Gas is now higher than it ever has been. It's expected to go much higher with, when we're looking at the strait being closed, we're going to feel the impacts of that directly. And I feel like I strongly believe I'm not prepared. None of us are prepared for the price increases that we're about to see that are going to impact everything. That is my number one concern. When people can't afford to keep their lights on, when they can't afford medication, when they can't afford food, they're not interested in hearing about anything else. They've got to be able to afford to live, and we've got to address that. And Democrats have had a really cohesive message on ways to make it life more affordable for Missourians here. And some of those things are reducing or eliminating sales taxes on groceries, doing sensible property tax freezes where it makes sense, right? But without defunding law enforcement and fire and roads. There are ways to do these things that are manageable. Every time a Democrat has been in charge of either the Oval Office or, the Capitol here in Jefferson City, we've had economic abundance. And then the Republican comes in and we've got to go back in and clean it up. Time and time again, we've seen that. And so I think that the budget, both at the state level and the personal budget of all the constituents of my district, are going to be first. It's going to be the most important thing. People are obviously, and I'm, my background, my bachelor's degree is in criminal justice policing. I was also the chief investigator for the Jackson County Children's Division. I've worked with law enforcement my entire career. I've also worked in hospitals as a hospital social worker and in psychiatric hospitals. And so talking about public safety is incredibly important to me, and putting forth not just things that are fluffy and make people feel good and make a good headline, but are evidence-based policies that our first responders and our public safety officials are asking for. So those are things that are really, really important to me. I believe that, and I'm sure Betsy talked about this too, because she's ranking member on budget, but the cuts that we're going to be seeing this year to our most vulnerable populations across the state, we've had to fight against Republicans to ensure that we have funding for domestic violence shelters. They were trying to cut $15 million from domestic violence shelters. That would have closed approximately 12 shelters across the state. Well, they were cutting funding to foster care resources. They were attempting to cut resources for adults with developmental disabilities. Yeah. So the most vulnerable in the state were the ones that were on the chopping block when things get hard. But what wasn't on the chopping block was adding an additional $10 million to the $50 million that had already been appropriated for private school vouchers. So $60 million. And for those of you who might not know, last year was the first time in the history of Missouri that money had ever been appropriated out of general revenue to go straight to private schools. That was the first time.
And I assume some of them were religious schools?
Almost entirely.
Almost entirely.
And 80% of those, 80 to 85% of those were the people that utilized those were families that were already sending their kids to those private schools. So they had already obtained the means to do that. But now they're doing it on the backs of the taxpayers of the state. And if you've got $60 million to send to private schools, do not tell me we don't have enough money to fund domestic violence shelters.
I hadn't heard the part about foster care. That really is upsetting. I'm going to ask you a simple question from David Luthold because I think it's important. He says, besides you and Betsy, is there another flipper out there that we should have our eye on? Someone who has a good chance of taking a Republican seat in the Senate, maybe.
We are the two target Senate seats right now. There is another seat up in Platte County that there is a Democratic primary for. They're not current electeds though, and so there is an I want to say one of them is Sharika Barnes and the other is Pam May is in the primary.
Okay, Platte County Senate.
Yeah.
Great.
So the numbers aren't quite as strong as mine and Betsy's, but not horribly far off. And in an election cycle like this, where we're seeing substantial movement, like when you look at those races from a few weeks ago in Florida, in Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach, where the state senator for Palm Beach, not only flipped that seat, but was running against someone who spent $1 million to the 100,000 that he spent. So, things are absolutely moving. And I would not be surprised to see us pick up seats that we were not even targeting.
And then we have a comment by Dave Taylor about what excitement we seem to have over just breaking the supermajority. But I love the way you and Betsy have both pointed toward more things. And I guess I'm asking almost the same question that you've really been asking before, but I'll just tell you, one of our local candidates, or one of our local politicians here, a big leader, left Jeff City saying that it was just that the Democratic Party had become so toxic in people's minds that certainly not to him, but he said it was hard to represent Democratic Party because so many Missourians hated the Democrats. That's all you had to do is use that word. And how do we get beyond that or explain to people that that was always a mistake? I think it was always a mistake. We make promises that we can't keep, but they're promises for things that we think people want, right? I mean, that's not lying.
I would go back to my first couple of races and the knocking and talking to people at the doors. There were so many people who said, well, I've after talking to me for 20, 30 minutes and saying, I've never voted for a Democrat before. I don't even think I've ever talked to a Democrat before. Yeah. But like what you're saying makes sense. Yeah. I've heard Crystal Quaid say this as well in the past that, it has not been unusual to see yards that have my sign next to a Trump sign. Mm-hmm. And that's because I stopped and I talked to that person and I developed a personal relationship with them. And I talked to them about what was important to them and their community and their neighborhood and in the state. And I think that so often it's easy to paint us as the party of, whoever the most extreme person that the far right is saying we are, right? That we all have nose rings and green hair and are socialists and commies and whatever. It's
Careful,
really
some of us in Missouri and Columbia do.
Nothing wrong with that at all. And, as a Democrat and a progressive, like I support people expressing themselves however they want. That used to be a conservative value, that as long as someone wasn't impacting your daily life, that, it was nobody's business. And so, but I think making those contacts, talking to people, developing relationships, spending the time to make people feel like you care about them, and you have to actually care about them too, because people see through it really fast. if you were just doing lip service on a door. So I think it's that is the biggest thing that we can do as Democrats, is show up in our communities, show up in spaces that we haven't for a while. If you're not lending to the conversation, then they can say whatever they want about you. And so you have to show up in your community. And we've done that over and over and over. And, I think anytime you see someone that's been able to flip a seat, it's because they were able to cut through that, right? They were able to cut through however they and their party has been historically stereotyped in that area by developing those relationships and showing up. It's hard to demonize someone when they're standing on your porch.
I've been concerned that Donald Trump has been able to scare people into getting up and going out and voting against Democrats because they're so afraid of them. I really hope that he won't be able to do that by November. I mean, like you say, things are looking very bad for them right now. How he's able to pull this one out and make it the Democrats' fault, I just can't believe. I think we'll let Herb, our very dependable questioner, give our last question today.
I love to hear the way you talk. You've got grit. You remind me of other people other accomplishers that I knew in my hometown. I was born and brought up in Washington, D.C. I would like to have you do for us what we didn't do for you, and that is to let us get to know you personally a little better and tell us a little bit more about where you come from, your values, and how you got into public life.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I was raised primarily in Oklahoma. My dad and my mom were both in the military, and we were stationed everywhere. I grew up in Germany. I spent about 3 years of my life there, and public service was always really, really important to me. And I decided to, either I couldn't decide whether or not I wanted to be a prosecutor or a social worker. So I took some time off after I graduated from undergrad and just really fell in love with social work and helping families reunite, helping stabilize families, helping connect folks to services. Really, really enjoyed that work and was really content doing that. My goal in life was to be a clinical therapist and do parent-child interaction therapy for folks who had endured really significant trauma. I mean, it's really, really important to me. I also thought about going back and getting my PhD and settling, trying to find ways to root out domestic violence culturally. That was my goal prior to the election in 2016 that, really kind of changed the trajectory of my life in a way that I could not have predicted happening. So I'm divorced. I'm a single mom of two. I've got a 14-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter, and they keep me very, very grounded. I keep pictures of them on my desk in Jefferson City to remind me of why I'm there. Oftentimes when people take hard votes on the floor or they skirt away from taking a vote that they know that they should have, what keeps me from doing that is remembering that my children will live with my vote far longer than I will, as will my grandchildren. And that helps keep me centered. I've often said that because of the sacrifice that my children have made with me, being gone, 3 to 4 days a week during session, that the second I feel like I am no longer productive or successful, I'll quit and go home. But we've, for better or worse, I've managed to be somewhat successful in Jefferson City and getting some really good pieces of legislation passed. I would say the one that I'm most proud of came out we passed in 2021. It was a standalone bill. I don't know if you all remember, but it was all over both state and national news. There were there was a lot of unregulated, unlicensed religious facilities for kids in this state. And they had absolutely no oversight. And I remember in September of 2020, seeing my phone blew up one morning because an article had come out in the Kansas City Star about one of these facilities having sex offenders working at it and perpetrating on kids. And with my background in child welfare, I lost my mind. I called the speaker that morning. I called the chair of children and families, and we immediately had hearings. And we put together a piece of legislation that next year, and we fought the religious right and folks that were anti-licensing and anti-regulation. And we were able to get, for the first time, people have been trying this for over 20 years. And it was the first time that we were able to get it through. And Cindy O'Loughlin, the president of the Senate, was filibustering my bill. She was filibustering against it. And we were able to gather the public together and put enough pressure on her and the Senate Republicans to get that bill passed. And those of you who have been watching Jefferson City know that that is no small feat. We filed that bill in December and got it passed in May. And it had never been filed before. And it was a standalone bill. That is my biggest, probably my legacy piece from my time in the House. I've gotten some other great pieces of legislation through as well, but that's probably the one I'm most proud of. And one of my goals when I get to the Senate is to ensure that anyone who has access to a vulnerable person in the state has to go through the licensure process. There is absolutely no reason that we should have exemptions for anything when it comes to our most vulnerable people. We need to ensure that we're having background checks, that we're having, health and safety standards that apply to all citizens in this state. And it's just abhorrent to me that anyone would make an excuse otherwise. And so that will be something that I will tackle immediately going in. I'm always concerned about the kids of the state and file a lot of legislation regarding child safety. And that is something I will continue to push as well. I'm kind of known as being the pit bull in my caucus when it comes to a variety of issues, whether it's gun violence, attacks on Medicaid, attacks on really anytime vulnerable people are touched upon in the state, I'm going to stand at the mic and give them the what for. And so I'll be really, really excited to take that to the Senate where we can really, really stop them.
You really dug into that question. That's wonderful. I think we must let you get on with your other work now, and I'll toss you the same thing. You may have heard Betsy answer it. What can we do to help people like you and Betsy?
Yeah, and I'm sure she said this too. The number one thing that she and I both need is money. We're up against the Republican machines. Like I mentioned before, I'm running against the Speaker of the House if he can get through his primary in August. He has substantial money. He has a substantial advantage over me when it comes to money. It is not insurmountable. I do not have to outraise him. I have to raise enough to get my message out. That is all. And we have, like I said, we have an army that we are raising up to knock doors and to combat everything. So we're really excited about that. If you know of anyone so the Senate district itself is all of Lee Summit, and that includes Greenwood, and then it has Lone Jack, Lake Lotawana, and Blue Springs. And so that's the sliver of the Kansas City area that we're talking about. So if you know anyone there who, wants to meet me, wants to get involved, that's always really helpful as well. Any assistance that we can get, we will accept.
Did you forget something, Herb?
Yes, I would like you to take note of my last name, Tillema.
Mm-hmm.
Look up in the dictionary for Lake Lotawana. There's a whole passel of my relatives there, and they are good Democrats.
Awesome.
Go get them. They also have money.
Thank you so much. There is a great group of progressives that have popped up in Lake Lotawana since the last election, and I've gotten to speak with them a couple of times. It's phenomenal. It's a group of about 80 now.
Okay, tell them us.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them a bunch of them. And you remind me of a student that David Luthold here also and I knew as student, and when young, Claire McCaskill. Both of you do.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Keri, so much.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate you. Have a great day.
All righty. Okay, well, that was just wonderful, Keri and Betsy, giving us lots of great ideas. And while Pam's getting set up,